Okay, so now we're on segment 3 of the differences between men and women and the sexual sins. The question I was given was how do you deal with pornography in marriage? So now we're going to talk about that. So I mentioned that God has made man's sex drive greater than woman. Man is the head of the woman. So basically, man, when he has sex with the woman, then that constitutes marriage. And man is now responsible for taking care of that woman for the rest of his life. Practically speaking, it doesn't work that way today. The world that we're in is grossly against what God has designed. God says, so man can have multiple wives. Women cannot have multiple husbands because it takes care of the man's sex drive, with that greater sex drive. And the financial considerations keep man from having more than a few wives, with the exception of like Solomon, who had 1,000 wives. And then you got all kinds of problems. You already have all kinds of problems when you have 2 wives or 3 or 4. But it just gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, it's hard enough. Like I say, one man and one woman together, they're not going to be happy in the ideal situation. What's ended up happening in our society is 100 years ago, men overstepped their bounds in what they did to women, and so then the men were happy and not the women. And now the tables have turned, and now the women are happy and not the men. And so what's going on then is, it just flips-flops. So then the men rebel with their sexual sins because that's their outlet. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. So what happens with in our society? Again, God's solution to ultimately God's solution is you just use the mind of Christ. But we're assuming, and so then in 1 Corinthians 7, you don't really need to get married, whether you're a man or a woman, because you just give yourself over to the Lord, serve Him. And that's all you need. You don't need to be married. But very few people do that today. And the problem is, in 1 Corinthians 7, it tells you, in verse 2, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power over her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud you not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. But he speaks this by permission, not commandment. I would that all men were even as myself, but every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this matter, and after another that. I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I, but if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. So you've got right there at 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 9. Basically, you want the godly way to look at marriage is the first answer is don't get married. But if you are going to commit sexual sin to the point where you're not going to use the mind of Christ, then and you would burn with sexual lust if you didn't commit the sexual sin, then get married. Get married due to sexual lust. Yeah. No one's going to agree with what I said. I'm just reading what the Bible says. It says, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. And it says, it is good to stay unmarried, but if you cannot contain, you have sexual lust, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. Better to marry than to burn with sexual lust. So, don't yell at me, I'm just reading what the Bible says. So, don't get married, but if you burn with sexual lust, then get married. Now, the problem in our society is, so he talks about every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner, another after that. There are some men and women who are perfectly content with never having sex their entire lives. They could be virgins and it would be just fine. And it's not, certainly they have temptations, but it's not an overwhelming type of thing, and they'll be fine. But the problem is that our society can move you in different directions. based upon society. So you may have the gift of celibacy, but the problem is you don't ever see people doing that today because our society is so sexualized. So even if someone is born with the gift of celibacy, our society is going to change them into a sexual being to where they will burn if they don't get married. So in most cases, you end up having to get married. Unless of course, you use the mind of Christ. But how many people are doing that? Very few. So what ends up happening is the men, the way that they can take care of their sexual desire is to be married by 2 or 3 different women. But the issue with that is now your flesh, the woman's flesh, you've got to keep that in mind on what you're going to do. And you can't satisfy that. And then you're not using the mind of Christ, because you're already going to have trouble in the flesh, and you can't concentrate on the things of the Lord if you're just married to one woman. If you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 30, 40, 50, 60 women married to, you're not using the mind of Christ. You're just doing damage control your entire life, and you're miserable. I mean, Jacob was miserable with 2 women. How are you going to do it with more than that? So really, the solution to all of this is just don't get married and use the mind of Christ. And if you're already married, stay married, because that's a lifetime contract, and use the mind of Christ to your best extent. And there you have it. If you're younger, you need to get married. Usually, especially in this society, no matter how you try to avoid it, and you may have the gift of celibacy, that gift is gone because of the society we're in. So that's the reality. So what ends up happening, you can't have the multiple women, even though God says it's fine. Our society doesn't allow that. So our society says that you can sleep with different women, but not at the same time. The biblical model, let's say somebody like Jerry Seinfeld. Now, of course, he's a person in real life. I'm not talking about his life. I'm talking about the comedy show called Seinfeld and the character he portrayed. In his personal life, I have no idea what he does, and I don't need to know. But on the show, I think someone went through all the episodes, and he slept with 70 women on the show. That is perverse. That is sexual sin because he didn't marry them and take care of them. He slept with 70 women, and he's responsible for taking care of 70 women. And he didn't take care of one of them. Once he was tired of one, he started dating another one. And then when that didn't work out, then he went to another one. And when that one didn't work out, he went to another one. That's our society's solution. Is that our society says sleep with one person at a time until you find the one. Okay? God says, no, you don't do that. Once you sleep with someone, you're married to that person, and a man is then responsible for taking care of that woman for his entire life. So, if you believe God and His Word, if you're a man, you're going to be really, 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 really careful who you sleep with. And a woman, by nature, not only does she have a reduced sex drive, but she also thinks, this is where she thinks rationally. This is funny because men tend to think rationally and women think emotionally, but when it comes to sex, it's the other way around. Women think rationally and say, if I sleep with that guy, I may get pregnant. If I get pregnant, I got to take care of this kid, and I financially can't do it. So then here's a woman, when it comes to sex, she thinks rationally. But the man, he just thinks emotionally. It's about, I got this sex drive, I want to satisfy it, that woman looks good, I want to sleep with her. If I get her pregnant, who cares? After all, I'm not pregnant. And if she tries to get support from me, well, I'll just become a deadbeat dad. And so, so what's funny is when it comes to regular life, men think rationally, women think emotionally. But when it comes to sex, women think rationally and men think emotionally. So men follow their emotions and want to have a bunch of sex. And women think rationally and say, I want to find the man that I want to be with for my entire life. And since our society now is controlled by women, so now you can sleep with one person at a time until you find the one. So it's socially acceptable like the Seinfeld, fictional Seinfeld character of that show, that it was perfectly fine that he slept with 70 different women over the course of 8 years. Well, first off, it's fictional, but second, because he's still trying to find the one. But God says, no, that's perverse. You sleep with someone, you got to take care of them the rest of your life. But then you got somebody like Warren Jeffs, who was the leader of the Fundamental Latter-day Saints, who kept the polygamy going. He actually married 70 women, and now he's in jail for it. Well, really, he's in jail for marrying underage kids, but that's a whole other story. And certainly he is a perverse man. I'm not trying to deny that. But what Warren Jeffs did in marrying 70 women was a whole lot better than what Jerry Seinfeld did in the fictional character of sleeping with 70 different women. Because Warren Jeffs, he went along with the biblical command that men are allowed to marry multiple women, but you just got to take care of them. And that's what he did. But our society says that's perverse. Why? Because women control our society. But our society says it's okay for a Jerry Seinfeld to sleep with 70 different women, as long as it's just one at a time, because he's trying to find the one. And there's the whole thing, well, you know, you got to find out if you're sexually compatible. You can't marry somebody until you have sex, because how do you know if it'll work out? It's just crazy thinking. Anyway, so our society says it's okay. So the solution in our society, the way society looks at sex, is you sleep with one person at a time, and then you just have multiple partners and everything until you find the one. And once you find the one, you are with that person for the rest of your life. So the way that man tries to satisfy his sex drive is sleeping with one person at a time, but then going to the next one, and they break up, then going to the next one, and then going to the next one. And then if a man is married, then he's going to get into pornography. Again, this is all in your sin nature. We're talking about that. Married man gets into pornography because he can't satisfy his sex drive with having 3 different women to sleep with, and his sex drive is greater than his wife's sex drive. So then what he does is, and he can't be with other women because he's found the one, he can get a whole lot of trouble, and his whole financial situation will be gone if he's cheats on his wife. So now, and of course he can't marry another woman because that's illegal. So then what he does then is he says, well, then I get into pornography, because then that way, you see, that way I can have sex more than what my wife wants to, but at the same time I don't get into trouble for being with another woman. So the vast majority, I think it's something like 2/3. I think 2/3 of society are doing this in pornography, but even unmarried people as well. More women are into this now, but it's mainly men because of their minds. Remember, women, they're into sexual sins in their minds as well, but they're watching Hallmark movies and reading romance novels. The men are into sexual sin. A romance novel and a Hallmark movie is just as bad to a woman as a pornographic movie is to a man. Let me say that again. A Hallmark movie or a romance novel is just as bad to a woman as pornography is to a man. It's sexual sin in the mind that caters to the sin nature of that person. So either one is bad. So you got a man having an emotional affair in his mind with fake women on pornography, and it takes his attention away from his wife and just being with her. And a woman is watching Hallmark movies or reading romance novels, and now she's having an emotional affair with these men in the novels or in the Hallmark movies, and that takes away from her attention being on the man. So the solution is not do any of that stuff and do what Paul says. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. And another thing to consider is the way you look at that. You look at Ephesians 5. And what are the commandments here? Husbands. So at first you're told in Ephesians 5:22. And the main reason why men get into the sexual sins is because the woman is not making herself, she's not fulfilling the commandment to submit herself to her husband. So Ephesians 5:22, the commandment is wives, submit unto your husbands. Okay. And in verse 25, Ephesians 5:25, it's husbands, love your wives. Okay, so here's what happens. Let's say, and I think it's pretty accurate what I'm about to say. I say in our society, a man wants to have sex 3 times per week. Again, it all depends on how old you are, what you're exposed to, if you have the gift of celibacy or not, and all these factors. But we're just going to generalize the whole thing. Man wants to have sex 3 times per week. Okay? Woman wants to have sex once per week. 1 time per week. Okay. So, wives, submit unto your husbands. So that what that means, a wife, because her husband is her head, wife should be willing to have sex 3 times per week. In her mind, she is willing to have sex because she's going to submit herself to her husband. So she's going to have sex with her husband 3 times per week, even though she only wants to do it once. She's going to have sex with her husband 3 times per week. The husband, love your wives. So what does that mean? Have sex 1 time per week. The husband wants to have sex 3 times per week. And he's in charge. His wife submitted to him. So he can have sex with her 3 times per week. But he's supposed to love her. And the wife doesn't want that. So then what you do is, you want to only have sex 1 time per week. So the solution is, if you're both doing what you're supposed to do, the solution is have sex twice per week. 2 times per week. Again, this is just a generalization. It's pretty accurate, but again, it just depends on how old you are, your circumstances, a whole bunch of other factors. But this is just a generalization. So, if the husband wants to have sex 3 times per week, and the woman wants to have sex 1 time per week, then the wife will submit unto her husband, being willing to have sex 3 times per week. The husband will love his wife, and only because he wants to do what she wants to do, have sex only 1 time per week. And the result is, you have sex 2 times per week. And again, no one is happy. Because I wanted to have sex 3 times per week, I only got to have it twice. And a woman only wanted to have sex once, and she had to have it twice. So no one's happy. But the sex drive thing is taken care of. And by the way, you got to have, you got to have children as well. You got to propagate the species here. So that can occur as well. So there's your solution. But the problem is, the wives, and this is in sex because of that, and that's a good illustration because that's the main difference there. But you also have to keep in account that the wives aren't just supposed to submit themselves to the husband in sex. They're supposed to submit themselves in everything. So the man makes every single decision. Not the detail stuff. I mean just the overall. It's not like the woman has to call, oh, the baby is crying, what do I do? Oh, how do I change the diaper? Not that stuff. But I'm just talking about any, decision that's going to affect both of you at the same time right then. The woman is to give the input to the man, and then the man is to make the decision, and that's the end of it. The wife needs to submit herself unto the husband, and the husband will make a decision that will also, neither one's going to be happy, but that's okay. And that really applies to everything. So the food situation. Let's talk about what we're going to eat for dinner. That's another big thing. Sex and food. So, dinner. What do we want to do? Okay. It just depends on how you grew up. And this was a big problem with me and Lana. I always wanted to eat at home. What we ate, I didn't care. Don't care one bit. You could buy some gourmet meal, filet mignon, or you could buy top ramen. And I'll eat top ramen, I'll eat filet mignon. I don't care. So this is Eric. Eric says eat at home. Lana is eat out. She's been in the house all day. She's been in these walls. She wants to eat out because she wants to go somewhere. I've been out all day. I'm tired. So I just want to relax. So the relaxing thing for me is eat at home. When I eat, I don't care. I just want to relax. My wife, she wants to talk about my day and how everything went and catch up with, because she missed half of herself because I'm over there at work and she's here. And remember, she thinks emotionally, so she's thinking about me. So she wants to know what happened with me. And I just don't want to think. So I don't want to talk about that stuff. Because my rationalization is I'm tired. Let me just rest. So eating at home, best solution. My wife wants to eat out. That's her best solution for what she wants. So the compromise would be then sometimes we eat at home, sometimes we eat out. But we are in a society where women have the say-so. So what ended up happening most of the time is I knew if we just ate at home, and we did that sometimes, she'd be upset with me because she didn't get what she wanted to do. She wants to eat out. Now, if she followed the command to submit it to her husband, we would eat at home. If she follows the command, and if I follow the command to love my wife, then half of the time we'd eat at home and half the time we'd eat out. But she's following her flesh, not wanting to submit unto me, so guess what we did? Is we ate out all the time. So what does that happen to me? Now, my wife is not fulfilling her role to me. So now, I'm less likely to do this compromise of having sex 2 times per week. And another thing is while men are looking at how a woman is physically, and he's attracted to that, and I said my wife would get more beautiful as time goes on, that's because you see how she loves, and she loved me in other things. I'm not trying to point her in a bad direction here. She submitted to me in the things of God, and that's the only thing that really mattered. And there are so few women who will do that. So kudos to Lana. She was a wonderful wife for doing that. I mean, she put up with my Bible studies, my Q&A, and she supported me all the way, and all the spiritual stuff. I could go on and on and on and on about that. So this is fine. I'll eat out all day long. She supports me in the spiritual stuff. That's fine. But what ends up happening is that a wife, when she doesn't submit it to the husband, then the wife is less attractive to the husband. And if the husband doesn't love the wife, then the husband is less attractive to the wife. So what ends up happening is the man, when the wife doesn't submit it to her husband, doesn't want to have sex with the wife as much as he would before. And when the husband doesn't love the wife doesn't want to have sex with the man like before. So now, what ends up happening is, now, in this situation here, and I'm just giving this example here. Now for me, it's different. I'm using the mind of Christ. Hopefully most of the time, I think. I don't know. Hopefully most of the time. So usually what ends up happening is then, but aside from that, let's say just from a fleshly standpoint. So now, the husband, remember he wants to have sex 3 times per week. Now he only wants to have sex with his wife once per week because she is less attractive to him because she's not submitting herself to her husband. Now the husband isn't loving the wife, so now, of course we're talking about in the flesh, now the wife wants to have sex with husband 0 times per week. So, what ends up happening is that the wife turns to romance novels and Hallmark movies once per week. And this is just generalization. One per week. She has an emotional affair with the man in the Hallmark movie or the Fabio in the romance novel once per week. And the husband gets into pornography twice per week. So now he's having the emotional affair with the fake woman with all the fake body parts and whatever they do in that twice per week. So now, and actually probably three, because really what ends up happening is the man and the woman aren't having sex at all. So she gets her quota of one. I hate to say quota, but one. And the man wants 3 times, and they're not getting any. So now he's having that 3 times per week through pornography. That's the problem. So what's the solution with dealing with pornography in marriage? Let's get to that next time, because we're already at 30 minutes. All right, maybe we'll finish next time. Thanks for watching.